Hey, what's going on? This is Charles with Chadwick Experiences. I just got introduced to a cool radio show brought to you by WDRB Media. I want to give a shout out to them. Chadwick Experiences, I got one goal, and that's just to reduce college debt by any means, whether somebody join a trade industry or somebody become an entrepreneur or people, young people especially, learn to cut their college costs. And how this can be accomplished is by having little short conversations just like this. I'm a self-published author. Some of my books been in Reader's Digest, Realtor.com, AP News. So I write books and they're all toned towards young people so that they can make better choices and also save time in life. I have a phenomenal guest here, and he's a published author as well. And that's how we kind of linked up. I met this brother online, and I think the connection was we're Carolina boys. I'm from North Carolina and he's from South Carolina. So I want to welcome Brother Qonquer to the first episode of Chadwick Experience radio show, not the podcast, but this is the radio show.
Brother, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate it. And first of all, let me thank you for allowing me to be on your show. More importantly, all the work that you've already done for standing up every avenue of success, man, I just want to commend you for it. I mean, it's a long road, but it's worth it. So when we met online,
Yeah.
and we had almost an instant connection, man, because there's a spirit that dwells with positive brothers. So I'm glad you connected with me. More importantly, I'm glad when you left Hawaii, man, you called me and you were in the area and we met up face to face, man. So I appreciate you, brother.
Same here, brother. And I just want to go ahead and jump right into it. It seems like in today's world now, it's a trend. Everybody wants to write books. One thing I would say is you don't get rich as far as maybe monetary at first, but the richness is in more spirituality, because if you want to write a book, to me, that means that it's something deep from within inside you. So I notice on Facebook, Instagram, everybody's talking about writing books. And I just want you to give us, Phil, what was it like to publish your first book and how much work did it took? I know for me, my first book ever, I got the idea in 2014 about student loans. And I wrote it while I was overseas in 2015, and I didn't publish it till like 2019, 2020. So to write a book, my main tip is if you think of something you want to write about, write it down in a composition book and it'll all come to play later on. But people always be like, where do I start? How do I write a book? My thing is just start writing. But I want you to give us, Phil, how you published your first book. And the title of that book is
Man Must Be Conquered.
that.
Whew. Honestly, man, this book was long in the making. I initially sat down and I wrote this book in like 2011, 2012.
Wow.
And as you go through the ups and downs of life, you know, you have to decide how you want it to look. Does it look like you, or does it look like the old you, or does it look like the new you? And oftentimes as men, we're too afraid to become new. So when I wrote it, I'm glad I didn't publish it when I wrote it, because it was written with a lot of anger. It was written
Gotcha.
with a lot of pain. It was written with a lot of stress, and it was written with a lot of pointing fingers. But I had to go back to the drawing board and realize that you really can't point fingers. You got to start from within. So when I wrote that book, I wrote it as an inspiration also to myself, to understanding God's principles, to understanding God's laws, statutes, and commandments that He has for every man, to learn to be a greater man and create something new within themselves. So when I titled it Man Must Be Conquered, um, I struggled with the title, but I understood that it wasn't for me to come up with the title. It wasn't for me to come up with the image. It wasn't for me to come up with anything other than the content. We miss basic principles in life, and one of those principles is for us to write. And I've
Mhm.
been writing since I was a child, and I stopped writing and I went back into my first love, which was writing, and I uncovered something new. And because I was disciplined to that writing and that skill set, it may not be conducive to all men, and it doesn't have to be. But because I was disciplined enough, I understood a hidden gem and a gift that I was given to from birth. I just wasn't operating in that gift. And everything came as I wrote, everything came second nature, brother. So it shocked me more and it probably shocks everybody else because I understand the storyline of how it came into fruition. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, man. And seemed like same story with you. You wrote it many years ago, and then it all comes to play at another time. And just to give the listeners a little, what happened to me is during the pandemic, I was purging, I was cleaning, and I found some old hard drives that I had in a storage box. So when I took it out and saw the title for my first book ever, I was like, man, I ought to finish it. So I finished it during the pandemic. And I like your story too, as you said you wrote it many years ago. I actually read your book, gave a phenomenal review, but I'm gonna go ahead and just jump into it, man. There's a passage in your book, and I believe it's on page 22, and it says, listening to a man twice your age
Yes,
can
sir.
save you half
Half.
the time. But I'm gonna repeat that for listeners. Again, listening to a man twice your age can save you half the time. Can you? I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's really not, because that's such a deep gem, man. I highlighted that in my copy of the book, and I kind of meditated on it a while. Can you expand on that?
Uh, brother, man,
Because I
we
know
we
it's a
we
deep.
we we're embarking on an era right now where we call men based on age. What I mean by age is not because you're older. Aged is a wise man. You know, we have we have a plethora of aged boys, and that's not a cheap shot to anybody that call themselves men. But we as men understand what we're truly lacking. We know what we're missing, and we know what we need. Oftentimes, we really don't go back to the drawing board and try to collect those things to make us better men. And I had to go back to realize some of the tutelage that I got when I was young, whether it was through verbiage or whether it was through silence. And you can listen to a man twice your age, even if he's not saying anything at all. You have to watch their actions. So I was privileged and I was raised around great men that worked. When I say worked, they worked. Uh, they didn't want anything free. They didn't want
Yeah,
anything instantaneous. They worked 12-hour jobs and then they turned around and they went straight into farming for another 2, 3, 4 hours. And they believed in raising their families and taking care and providing for their family. So understanding that they never made an excuse, and even though they weren't allowed the opportunities to amass the same level of knowledge, information, and education that we did, they never made an excuse. But we have those tools and we make excuses. And I went back in my memory bank and watched every single thing that I was taught. Even when he didn't say anything and I made mistakes, I heard his voice like, nah, you knew better. And it took me back to that old landmark. And oftentimes we have a generation now that don't want to listen to older men because they don't really have older examples. And it's not their fault. It's really not their fault. Some of us are trying to go back and rescue them, but we understand the uphill battle that we face. It's not that we want to abandon them, but we still have a duty. And watching those older men and listening to those older men and seeing the actions of those older men that provided and take care of their families, they took great care of their families. Now, when I say take care of their families, it's not this modern world taking
oh
care of the
yeah,
family where you could, somebody else's idea is you got to make a certain amount of money.
yep,
It's I provided for you. Like you had a roof over your head,
yep.
you didn't
Food.
struggle, and it paved the way for the next generation to be 10 times better. And watching those guys, watching those men raise their families, cover their families, pray for their families, and lead their families to success, I couldn't see a better example. So when I came up with that quote, listening to men twice your age will save you half the time, I realized that all of those men were double my age.
Mm.
And had I listened, probably in my teens and 20s, I could have salvaged some of the nonsense that I struggled with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, man. I agree so much, and I'm about to hit a milestone myself, man. I'm gonna be 40 this year in year 2024. And it hit me, man. Like this year, I was like, man, even I wish I would have listened a little bit more. Even though my dad put me on game, I don't know if that's a Carolina thing. Both of my grandparents were sharecroppers. My dad was a plumber, and he always made me work on Saturday mornings. I couldn't watch cartoons. He had me and my brother out there working in the yard, but he would always tell me, he said, "Son, right now you young and you want to have fun," but he was like, if you can not live as everybody else now, it's going to be tough for you. But when you get older, who's to say people can live just as you are because you put in that work? So one thing about that book, and there's many gems in that book, and again, man must be conquered, and that's what it's about, conquering. And while you was just talking, man, I just thought about something. Is that where we're at now, where the world definition of a man, you got to make six figures. You got to be able to, buy your wife or whatever girlfriend a BMW. Like I'm learning now, even in myself, that I had to conquer myself, the man, the spirit, the energy, whatever we want to call it, inside of each individual is different. But I would say there is a basis for a man, whether it's about being physical strength, mentally strong, spiritually strong. I'll never forget this quote what my friend gave me overseas. He said, sometimes when you have a man in anybody's life, it represents some type of protection. If you got a guy that's straight up in the gym, that's physical protection. If you got a man that's in banking, accountant, that's financial protection. If you got an attorney, and he could be a nerd, he could be 5'1", but if that man can go in the courtroom and know the law, he's going to protect his family or woman, whoever's in his life. So that really resonates with me, man. Man must be conquered, man. And it's a challenge, for each individual boy that grows up and to be a man, to conquer that for sure.
Well, I'll definitely, man, because you were one of few that asked me about the topic, but it's universal.
Yep.
Man must be conquered. It's going to happen either way. It's going to
Yeah,
happen.
somebody.
It's going to happen whether man comes to an understanding and conquer himself, or whether society decides to come up with new avenues to conquer a man.
Mhm.
Either way, man is going to be conquered. And we have to understand where we are with this whole evolution.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about who wins, it's about how much of you are you willing to give. So within, you have to have parameters as a man. You have to have a yes, you have to have a no. There's a parable in the Bible that said, let your yeas be yeas and your nays be nays. And you have to stand on that. You have some who are so waverable for all different types of avenues of life. They don't understand that that creates a double minded and it lessens their value as men. Now, you could still love someone and not agree. You don't have to disagree and disrespect. You can love someone and disagree. But if you disagree and they become dysfunctional, then you understand that that's not for you.
Yeah.
And with that understanding, like we all have to have the ability to grow together. This world is already doing a thing, and there's nothing that we can do about it. But there's not anything, there's something that you can do for you as a
Mm.
man. There's something that you can put in place for you and your family and you and anybody that you involve yourself with as a protective measure, as a standard and a system for your own family. We abandon those things just to be a part of everybody else's standard, everybody else's system, and everybody else's ideology. That makes you a shell of a man. That makes you less of a man and more of everybody else who's pouring into you. So you have to come as a man. You have to come with a spout or several spouts, and you should leave them on depending on who's talking. And you can, if they pouring nonsense, you let it flow right out. But if they're dropping gems, you know to close that valve on.
Exactly, exactly, man. And I just look at just what's going on, man, what you're talking about. Like the world can put a lot of pressure and try to make a man defy himself or even the circle or clique of people you in based off the world standards. But just sitting here talking with you and chopping it up, man, I really think that the the real true man knows he has to define himself as what he's being led to be done to defy himself as a man. So again, I love your title, Man Must Be Conquered, and it is a journey.
He
But
must.
yeah, but this is getting good. I'm going to go ahead and take a radio break. And again, this radio show, Chadwick Experience, is being brought to you by WDRB Media.
This music segment is brought to you by Chadwick Experiences, and I'm your host, Charles Chadwick, here on WDRB Media. Tune in every week during the same time. Listen live 24/7 on the TuneIn Radio app, Streamer, Apple Music, or at WDRBmedia.com and click on the Listen Live logo. We are WDRB Media, the voice of the community. Hi, this is Charles Chadwick, host of Chadwick's Experiences. Be sure to follow me at Instagram and Facebook at Reduce College Debt and stay up to date on our live broadcast. We are WDRB Media, the voice of the community. Hi, this is Charles Chadwick, host of Chadwick's Experiences radio show. By being on air, I'm able to share my life stories and experiences. As I have traveled all around the world, I have one main purpose, and that's to give a little something back to the next generation for a little motivation. Because in today's world, in order to reach their goals and find success, we all need some determination. Thank you, WDRB Media.
We're back now from the commercial break, and man, again, I'm still stuck on that title, man. That title go hard, and it's gonna be around for a long time because that's what, in my opinion, what most men you have to do while you're here on Earth is you gotta conquer yourself, not what the world say you're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
But while we're on this subject, this is the summer of 2024, and I want to just give a shout out to you. While I was down here visiting from my sister's wedding in North Carolina, I live and work in Hawaii. I actually got to meet and mentor a young guy that Brother Qonquer introduced me to, and it was fun to tell him not what I think he should do, but just tell him exactly like this quote says. You know, I was about twice his age. I told him my mistakes and just gave him some options. What would you say with this next generation that a young man has to conquer far as in the job place? And again, this summer, I know there's single mothers that's pressuring them boys. Hey, you might need to join the military. Do you want to go to college? Do you want to go to a trade? What would be your advice how a young man can conquer himself and dealing in the faces of the pressure, what it's like after you graduate from high school? And I know for me, I hated school, bro. I was a D student. I could have cared less. I said, I'm not going to college. I took a year off, and that was one of the best things for me. By taking that year off, I didn't have no pressure, and I slowly found what avenue I wanted to go. And then I went to college. Then I got into construction, and then I went on to a university. But I know for young people, there is pressure to be conquered, not even just young men, but also young women. What kind of advice or in that scenario would you give to a young person, especially a young man who's about to go in today's ever for changing workforce?
I would tell you this, brother. We're living in a time right now where everybody's pointing fingers, right? But they're
Yeah.
still making a decision to procreate, and then they're pointing fingers, and they're procreating, and they're pointing fingers, and they're procreating. But when do we stop and start over? When do we stop and analyze the detriment of the finger pointing and the procreation? So I would start with understanding that our daughters, they need examples. Our sons need instruction. If you want to argue that on the left. But if you want to fix it, you have to be solution based and then argue and not debate it, but move towards the right. Our daughters don't have any examples and our sons don't have any instructions, and we can see what's being played out on every network, on every social media. When everybody's asking like, what's the problem? To me, that's the problem. There are no examples and there are no instructions, but everybody's still procreating, everybody's still pointing fingers. So when we can get back to a collective understanding of knowing that our sons need instructions from their father, our daughters need examples from their father, then that means that they won't make the mistakes maybe that their mothers made or anybody else had made, that they have a perfect example of a father that is supposed to walk them down the aisle and give them away to somebody better than them. And that the sons will follow instructions to make a new foundation and build upon what a father has done. We have strayed away from it so much to where we don't even know where to start at anymore. But they won't stop where it starts, and that's procreation. So we have to be genuine with our selection process. That's both male or female. We have to be strategic with what's planted in you and what you allow to be planted in you.
Got you, man. And I picked up a gem. You just said I'm 40 years old, and I've never heard what you just said about far as a father and a daughter, that the father should give the daughter away to somebody that's even better than him. I mean, I've heard men when they meet, the groom, or they about to meet the son-in-law, say, "Hey, take care of my daughter. I'm gonna, beat you up and all that." But I've never looked at it that the man in his heart, he wants a man that be able to kind of fulfill those shoes. But I think that should be the ultimate goal, that you give a daughter away to somebody that's even better than you are. That's really what it should be about,
Right.
for
And
sure.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your upbringing is. I mean, again, we place too much value on money and not on character. If you feel that a man's value is in his money and that he should put you in a mega mansion, you may not have the value that you should have going into a marriage. But if he's going to honor you and respect you and cover you and protect you and possibly die for you, and you're exactly who you're supposed to be for him, you can help that man get that mansion.
Yeah.
Because he's a man of character. The same thing with a young man. If he's a young man of instructions, he won't falter in the streets like some of us have made mistakes when we were young. He would
Yeah, me
walk
too.
diligently in those instructions. That means he would even play around with a woman and waste their time.
Yeah.
So there's some corrective action that we all have to take instead of pointing the finger and placing blame, because we all made choices, young or old. We made some foolish decisions. When you walk away from those foolish decisions, you realize that you become a better man and a better woman.
Got you, man. And I hate we were getting into some good details, man, for sure. But I just want to end on a two notes. Again, my heart goes out to the next generation. You don't have to go in depth, but could you just tell us what was it like for you from that high school transition, and what was something that you had to conquer while you was making that decision? What pathway did you go to? Again, with me, I hated school, so I was blessed that my parents didn't put pressure on me, man. I took a whole year off and then went into construction, went to community college and all that jazz. What was it like for you coming out? If there's any parents listening or young people listening to this, what was it like for you?
I wouldn't tell anybody to necessarily follow my path, but what I would say is this: like I had goals of playing football. I was a decent athlete in high school. Had a couple of different colleges that were after me,
Right.
but I had an opportunity to go to Paris Island, and I watched this Marine graduate from boot camp, and that image never left my mind. Ironically, this Marine is my godmother's nephew, and he ended up retiring from the Marine Corps. He's a minister right now.
Okay.
He's one of few that I actually respect and admire based on what I see. But that image never left my mind, and because of that, I went with I can't say second love. It was my first love. I made that decision when I was young. So ever since I was the age of 4, I wanted to be a Marine. And most people can't say that they actually lived their lifelong dreams, but I had. I did exactly what I wanted to do. I spent almost 26, well, almost right at about 26 years in the Marine Corps, retired, and I enjoyed my life. I enjoyed my stays, both good and bad, the ups, the downs, but it taught me life lessons, man. And I was able to come back and retire and decompress and get back to my initial love, which was writing.
Nice, nice, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing your book. I know uh, what somebody told me once when I've written one of my first books, they said you're not a real author unless you write another one. So I know you probably got other books that you're coming out with. And where can we follow you at? Do you have a
Yeah.
website, social media, and all that other jazz? Because I'm telling y'all, this book, Man Must Be Conquered, it's deep, man. It is very deep. And again, long live that quote, man must be conquered. Until the ending of time for anybody in this world, man will always have to spend time trying to conquer himself. That is a real gem. Man must be conquered.
Brother, I humbly appreciate you for that, man. I really do. Um, they can find the book on Amazon at Man Must Be Conquered. I also have a workbook on Amazon as well. They can follow me on any Instagram at Qonquer, Qonquer. You can follow me on YouTube at Qonquer_, or you can follow me on conquerspirituallifecoaching.com. That's where my website is, where I offer consultations and private meetings with anyone who may be struggling with anything, but they don't really want anybody to know. It's an uphill battle for us as men. That doesn't take you away from seeking help. We just not taught to seek help. And a lot of
Exactly.
times we're pent down with so much stress. We're stressed from the work from work. We're stressed from jobs. We're stressed from careers. We're stressed from education. We're stressed from family. And sometimes you come back home and put on a happy face, and you're really depleted, and your family is suffering on the inside because you have nothing left. So it is important for us to seek the level of help that we need. When we do that, we find more peace, and you realize that you're not in it by yourself. And someone may just have that answer to get you, to the next level. So I highly encourage
Exactly.
you, brother, even if it's not me and you seek somebody else, always turn to someone who can offer you some advice from an experienced perspective, someone who's gone through the same damage, the same mental torture that you've gone through, not someone who's just going to talk to you just to get a dollar.
Bet, man. And that's what I like, how you use the word experience. And that's what the name of my business is, Chadwick Experience. And I'm just sharing all of these experience, man, because I think life in itself is an experience. So this is the first episode of the Chadwick Experience radio show, and it's brought to you by WDRB Media. So big shout out to them, and look forward to many more conversations with Brother Qonquer. This brother is deep, and I know he got so many more books, so many different outlooks and perspective. I mean, it's on fire. And when I went to visit him, he even hooked me up with this bracelet, man, to go ahead and tell you about Qonquer, man. So he's a real one. And again, I think the bond is just Carolina thing. I don't know, man. But this is Chadwick Experiences.
And I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for having me.
No problem.
Thank you.